of Measurement of Growth, National Income and Per Capita Income chapter. So friends, let us just quickly have a look at what we have been studying as part of part 1 and part 2. So in part 1, we started off with the basic understanding of what is growth and development. Then we moved on to understand what an economy is, right? And when you want to measure the capacity of an economy to produce goods and offer services, we have certain indicators, okay? The 4 indicators were GDP, GNP, NDP and NNP. We also came to an understanding that in India, when it comes to calculate the national income, we consider the indicator GDP, that is gross domestic product, right? Then in the second part of the chapter, we understood how that GDP at market price is calculated when it comes to Indian context, right? We also saw that there were certain methodological changes that were brought in the year 2015, and as per that changes, we had to find the GDP at market price by taking in the GVA at basic prices of different sectors, right? So we went into the understanding of the concepts like what is factor cost, what is market price, what is basic price, how are these interrelated, and how do you arrive at the final indicator, that is GDP at market prices. We also had a discussion that initially the GDP was calculated at factor cost and now it is being calculated at market price. So what is the significance of this change? How the consumer end is given importance, right? So all these things we had seen. Then finally at the end of part 2, we also came across that the GDP can be calculated at nominal GDP or real GDP. That is calculating GDP at constant prices, which is the real GDP, and at current prices, which is the nominal GDP. We had also talked about an indicator at the end. Now let us begin with that question that I had left you with as part of the second lecture, right? Let us begin now. Okay friends, so we were discussing this concept of nominal GDP, right, and real GDP. Okay, so I would recommend that you need to watch part 2 and only then you would be able to understand this GDP deflator. Okay, so just understand this, that we were having a discussion where we came to an understanding that if I want to answer this question, that there is a country X and I'm asking you whether the capacity of this particular country to produce goods and services has increased or not comparing to its base year. Right? So in order to answer this particular question, what indicator that you need to refer? You need to see the real GDP of that particular nation in that particular year. Right? So this is a concept which is very important for us to understand. Now, keeping this understanding intact, the other thing that I put forth was, now if I want to understand how has been the price movement over the years for a particular country when compared to base year, how are you going to find that? Okay, so the answer lies in one of the important terms or indicators that we used, that is called GDP deflator. This is very important, friends. Now here you can see how do you arrive at this GDP deflator, that is the question. Okay, now you need to use both the nominal GDP and the real GDP to arrive at this particular term, that is GDP deflator. So it is nothing but the ratio of nominal GDP to real GDP. Okay, so when you divide these two terms, you would get the GDP deflator. And when you see this number or when you see the answer, you will see or you will be able to find out how the prices have actually moved from the base year to the current year. Now you would ask me this question. This is a very simple understanding. You're dividing normal GDP by real GDP. But now here comes a question. Why are we doing so? Okay. See, if you have understood how we have calculated nominal GDP and real GDP, then you would understand that in both these terms, one thing was constant. What was it? The one thing that remained constant was the volume of production. Okay, now one small disclaimer here, do not get confused. When I say real GDP and nominal GDP, I'm talking about the same year. For example, if I'm taking 2018-19, for the same year, for this particular year, I need to calculate nominal GDP, and for the same year, I need to calculate real GDP. Okay. Now, when you compare these two values or when you're computing these two values, the one thing that would be fixed is the volume of production. Okay, so when you are calculating the nominal GDP for the same amount of goods and services, you are going to use the current prices, right? And when you are calculating the real GDP for the same amount of goods and services, you are going to use the constant prices. Okay, so when I say constant prices, this is nothing but the base year prices. So you will realize here that only the prices are changing. The volume is remaining the same. Okay, we are testing this for the same quantity of goods and services. Okay, so obviously when you divide nominal GDP by real GDP, if there is a change, if you do not get the answer as 1, that means there has been an increase in the price levels when compared from the base year to the current year. Right? What we will do is we will pick up the same example that we were discussing in part 2 of our chapter, wherein we were calculating normal GDP and real GDP. From that particular example, let us see what is the GDP deflator, right? Okay, so let us understand the example here. So we would recollect that we were using the base year 11-12, which is actually the base year used in India as well. So we were talking about 2 products there. One is shirt and other is trouser, right? So we have seen that the value of one shirt was rupees 10. Okay, and the value of one trouser was rupees 20. Okay, this was in the base year 2011-12. Now talking about 2018-19, okay, the value of one shirt was rupees 50. Okay, and the value of one trouser was rupees 80. Right? Now what we need to do, we need to find the nominal and the real GDP for the year 2018-19. Okay, for the same year, I'm going to compute 2 things. One is the nominal GDP and the other is the real GDP. Okay. Okay, so now the coming to quantity. So we came to know that 5 shirts were produced in the year 2018-19 and 5 trousers. Okay. Now let us calculate first the nominal GDP. Okay, you need to come along, calculate along with me and try and remember the concepts that we have studied earlier. Okay, so what is going to be the nominal GDP of ours? So in the case of nominal GDP, recollect again what are the prices that we are going to use? We are going to use the current prices. So which are the current prices here? It is nothing but rupees 50 and rupees 80. Okay, so multiply the quantity and the price. It is 5 into 50, that is 250 worth shirt was produced, and 5 into 80, that is 400 worth trousers were produced. Okay, so totally what is the value that we get? Nominal GDP is going to be rupees 650. Right? Now let us calculate the real GDP for this particular year, that is 2018-19. Now you need to tell me in real GDP what are the prices that we are going to use. We are going to use the constant prices. So what is constant price over here? The base year prices, which is 2011-12, right? So now it is 10 into 5 because we have quantity being 5. For the same quantity we are finding, okay, because we are calculating it for the year 2018-19. But the prices would be that of the year 2011-12, right? So what is the total cost of shirt that is going to be there? 5 into 10, that is rupees 50. Okay, and what is the trousers cost? It is going to be here 5 into 20, that is going to be 100. So what is the answer going to be totally? It is going to be 150. Okay, so now we have the values with us, normal GDP, real GDP. Now calculate GDP deflator. So what is GDP deflator? We have just now seen it is the ratio of nominal GDP, okay, to real GDP, correct? What is the nominal GDP that we have? It is 650. And what is the real GDP that we have? It is 150, right? So now what you need to do, divide 650 by 150. So you would get an answer which is 4.33. Now what do you mean by this number? That means when you compare the prices of the current year to the base year, the prices have increased by 4.33. This many times the price has increased. Okay, so you can see the level of price rise when you are calculating this indicator, which is GDP deflator, right? Now tell me, if there had been no price rise, the answer would have been 1. Okay. Okay, friends, so now we have come to yet another section of our particular chapter, that is methods to estimate national income. So let us just quickly revise and relate. So we have seen that there are 4 indicators that are used to measure the capacity of goods being produced and services being offered in a country. Those indicators are GDP, NDP, right, NNP and GNP. Right? So these were some of the things that we had look at. Now, when you see all these 4 indicators, what were we ultimately finding? We were actually finding out the final value, right, of all the goods and services that are produced. Okay, there were different circumstances. Like in GDP, we were bothered about where those goods and services are being offered and produced. In the case of GNP, we were concerned with who is producing it. Right, so all these differences were there, but the one thing in common was that we were taking this final value of products, or you can say goods and services, right? So basically this was nothing but the output method or the product method. Okay, so now there are other methods as well that can be used to compute national income. One is the expenditure method and the other is the income method. Okay, so what we'll do is we will first see the circular flow of income, a very simple system we will create, and then we will have a look at the various possibilities and quickly see how using each of these methods we can calculate the national income, right? So here you can have a look at this particular chart that you can see on your screens. So now what we are going to consider is there is an economy where there are 2 players or 2 sections of the society. Okay, you have individuals, okay, that form a part of households. Okay, and you have businesses or firms, okay, manufacturing goods. Okay, now in this particular economy, what happens is we are not considering the role of government. So we are thinking that there is no government that exists. Okay, and we are also negating the role of the other countries. That means we are assuming that there is no export and import that is taking place. Plus, we are assuming certain other things as well, that whatever income the household or the individuals are gaining by working under these firms, they are not saving anything. In fact, whatever income they are getting, they are buying the goods and they are consuming it. Okay, so these are certain assumptions that you need to make. No government, no export import, no savings. Okay, now what happens here is there is a scenario where there is a business firm, and or you can say manufacturing unit rather, and that manufacturing unit is producing certain goods. Okay, and for to produce those goods, it has to employ certain people, that is called labor, right? So now what happens is when it employs this labor, it obviously needs to pay wages to the labor, right? So whatever money that the labor is having in its hands is because of the work that it is doing for these firms. Okay, and using the same money, the individuals are going to buy the products which are manufactured by this business firm. Okay, so this is a scenario that you need to understand very properly. Okay, now let us remind ourselves of the various factors of production. Okay, so what are these factors of production? If you remember, these are nothing but the resources which are used in the production of goods and services. Okay, so what are the 4 broader categories of it? One is your land, right? There is labor, right? And then there is capital, and then there is entrepreneurship. Right, so these are the 4 important factors of production that we have. Okay, now there are factor incomes as well. Okay, suppose if you use land, you need to pay rent. Okay, so this is the income or factor income when this particular factor of production is used. When you hire laborers, you need to pay wages. Again, this is a factor income. Okay, now if the capital is invested, if you invest capital, then you will get interest, or you need to pay interest if someone is investing capital in your firm. So here it is again a factor income. Entrepreneurship, if someone is using their entrepreneurship skills and coming out with ideas and being a part of a firm, then they would be given the profit sharing or some profit they would attain out of it. So here again profit is a part of, or you can say it's a factor income. Okay, so if we summarize these things, what are the factors of production? Land, labor, capital and entrepreneurship. What are the factor incomes you have? You have rent, you have wages, you have interest and you have profit. Okay, now all these things are coming into play here. Now let us elaborate upon this diagram. Okay, now let us start from this diagram. Now let me tell you that what are we going to calculate? We are going to calculate national income. Okay, through this diagram now you need to understand one thing, the assumptions that we had started out with. Okay, so only if we assume those things we will be able to make sense of whatever we are discussing here. Now here these are individuals, this is the manufacturing unit. Okay, now what happens is this particular business firm provides goods and services to the individuals, right? You can see here. Okay, and what happens is when this business firm provides the goods and services, these individuals would definitely pay for it, right? So they are going to make certain expense here. This is going to be the expenditure. Okay, now suppose if they are buying one shirt out here which is for rupees 100, then obviously they want to pay the manufacturing unit 100 rupees. Right, so just an example I'm telling. So here you can understand that goods and services are being transferred from these units to individuals, and then these individuals are going to make expenditure for it. Right, understood? Now the next part here, if you see, these individuals are offering their services. That means whatever goods are being produced here, it is being done with the help of the labor that has been engaged by this particular unit. Okay. Now what happens when they offer service? Obviously, they would be paid certain wages, which is the income of these individuals. Okay, so you can say this is the household income. Okay. Now you need to understand one thing, that whatever money this particular unit is paying these individuals, using the same amount of money, they are buying the goods which are produced by this manufacturing unit. So it is a circular flow which is taking place. So money is just changing hands. Okay, first the business, your manufacturing units are paying laborers using the same money. They are buying the goods and services manufactured by the unit, and again the same cycle is continuing. Okay, so understood? That is why the name you have circular flow. Okay, now I have three methods of calculating this national income. Okay, let me see what are these three methods. The first thing is, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the output method or the value added method. So in this output method, what I will be doing, I will just value, or I'll find the value of the products, okay, that is being manufactured by the firm. I will not bother where the products are going. I'll just see that product, I will see the price of it, and we will calculate it. Okay, so this is one method that we are going to find. So here we can place that method here, finding the value of the goods and services. The next one is I'm going to use the expenditure method. Okay, so when I'm using this expenditure method, what I'm going to see is how much this particular individuals have paid the manufacturing units for the goods and services. Remember, I've mentioned here this term pay expenditure. Okay, now we are assuming in this example that goods worth rupees 100 have been produced. Okay, so now how much these people are going to shell out for those goods? Rupees 100. Right, so you can see that here also the national income is going to be rupees 100. Now when these people buy those goods, I'm going to refer it to as expenditure. So I'm using only the method of expenditure to calculate the national income. So again my answer is going to be rupees 100. Okay, and third, let me see income method. So when I talk about income method, what I'm going to be bothered, how much are these individuals earning when they are going for work in this manufacturing unit. Okay, so these people are paying them some amount of money. With the same amount, they're going to buy these goods. So what is the amount that we know? That is rupees 100. Right now here you can see whether I follow the output method, whether when I am checking out the value of the goods and services produced, or when I go for expenditure method where I'm concerned about how much individuals are shelling out and paying these manufacturing units for the products they buy, or when I'm using the income method which is referring to the wages that these individuals receive from the business firms, I can see that all these three methods would end up in the same value, which is rupees 100. Right? So here you can say that there are various methods by which in an economy you can calculate national income. You need to be aware of these methods, and the indicators that are in use these days are following this output or value added method to arrive at the national income. Right? Now friends, let us take an example to calculate the national income by using all the three methods that we have just discussed. So this is going to be our aim through this exercise, that we'll see all the three methods in one example. And now while talking about each of these methods, please note down some of the important points, okay? And let us start with it. So there's a farmer, a famous example where the farmer is producing wheat, okay? Now there's a bakery owner, and that particular bakery owner uses this wheat as its input, so he goes and buys wheat from this farmer and pays him rupees 50. Okay, now this bakery owner uses that particular wheat and prepares cakes, and he sells these cakes to the consumer for rupees 200. So if a consumer comes to buy the cake to this bakery owner, he needs to pay rupees 200. Right? Now, one other extra thing that you need to note, that there's a helper who has been appointed by this farmer, and that particular farmer pays rupees 20 as wages to him. Okay, and the bakery owner has also appointed a helper, and he pays rupees 60 to him as wages. Okay, so these are some of the important points. Okay, now let us get back to the calculation. So first we are going to use the product method, okay, or you can say the output method or the value addition method. So now what you're going to do here, you're going to find the final value of the goods and services produced. Okay, now you need to remember or recollect the discussion that we were having, that when you're calculating the final value, you need to subtract the value of intermediate goods. So you're not going to take into account the money spent on the raw materials. And why are we not going to do so? Because we need to avoid double counting. So immediately recollect, we have been discussing a lot about this, right? So let us get to work here. So we have farmer, okay, and we have the bakery owner here. We have the consumer also, just writing down the players, and let us see the value of the final products. Okay, so here for farmer, you can see that 50 rupees worth of wheat is produced, and for the bakery owner produces a cake worth rupees 200. So this is the value of the product, final value, but you need to subtract rupees 50 from this 200, because out of this 200 rupees, rupees 50 is the value of the input, okay, or the product that is used, that is already accounted in national income. Okay, so the answer is going to be 200 minus 50, that is 150. Okay, so the total national income of ours by using the output method is going to be rupees 200. Right? Okay, now moving on to the second method, which is the expenditure method. Okay, so when you're using the expenditure method, what you're doing is you are finding out the value of final expenditure. Note this important point, or the expenditure that is made on the product for end use. Okay, so who is the end user here? It is the consumer. So you need to find out how much expenditure that consumer has made. So that consumer has made an expenditure of rupees 200. So this is going to be our national income. Okay, now if you look at the expenditure that the bakery owner has made, it is nothing but rupees 50. right? You can see that. But here that 50 again is a part of rupees 200, and that particular product is not used for final consumption. It is again moved on to the consumer, which is the end user. Okay, so the final expenditure of ours is made by the consumer. Okay, now moving on to the third method, that is the income method. Okay, now you see there are four players here. Okay, one is the farmer and its helper, the bakery manufacturer and its helper. Okay, now you need to recall that income method, we are calculating the factor incomes. So we were discussing what are the factor incomes. They are nothing but rent from land, right, and wages from labor, okay, and interest from capital and profit from entrepreneurship. Okay, so we here, if you see, let us start with this farmer. So this farmer is going to pay rupees 20 to the laborer. So the profit that the farmer is making is rupees 30. Okay, so 30 rupees with the farmer as the profit. Okay, and 20 rupees is going to be the wages earned by the labor. Okay, so you have 30 plus 20 here, but the factor incomes. Then when you talk about the bakery owner, that bakery owner, out of 200 which the consumer pays to the bakery owner, he is going to pay 60 rupees as wages to its helper. Okay, so 140 rupees is going to be the profit of the bakery owner, plus what is going to be the wages of the helper, 60 rupees. Okay, so now we can see there are four factor incomes, two obtained through profit and two obtained through wages. Okay, so when you calculate all these wages plus profits, you will get rupees 200. Right, now have a look at all these three numbers. They are the same, 200, 200 and 200, right? So we have used all these three methods to calculate the national income. Okay friends, so now let us have a look at some of the important terms. Now you consider national income. This can be broken down into smaller components. Okay, so we need to arrive at a term here which is mentioned, which is called personal income. So you can derive this personal income from national income by considering certain factors. Either you need to add certain things or subtract. We shall see what is that. Now, if you talk about personal income, we are referring to the income that is retained by the individuals of an household. Right? So let us start one by one. So you need to understand that this entire national income is not distributed among the workers or among the participants of this economy. Right? See, what happens is the firms, if they are making profit, they would actually keep certain profit aside and the rest would be distributed among the stakeholders. Okay, so there is going to be a good chunk of profit that remains undistributed. The case may be either with the enterprises or even the firms. Okay, so now you need to subtract this particular undistributed profits from national income. Okay, so this is the first thing that we need to subtract. Now move to the next thing. Here you can see corporate tax. So there is the tax which is levied on the profits made by the corporate houses. So again, that would be subtracted from the national income before the amount is distributed among the stakeholders. So this is the second thing that you need to subtract. Okay, now consider a situation. Here you have individuals. Okay, and here you have, for example, corporate houses. So what happens is these individuals can actually get loans from these corporates. So they are getting loans. So now they have to pay interest for those loans as well. Okay. And there can be another situation where the corporate actually gets loan from individuals and pays interest to them. Okay. So this can be here corporate / you can write government as well. Okay, now what is happening here? At the end, when you want to calculate, you will realize that we need to subtract the interest payments that the individuals are making to the corporate houses, and you need to add the interest that the individuals are receiving from the corporate houses to come at the personal income. So which is called net interest payments made by households. So this is the third thing that you need to subtract from the national income. Okay, next comes addition of transfer payments to the households from the government and firms. So when you talk about transfer payments, these are certain payments that are not made for certain service provided or for certain goods, but these are certain offers of merit. For example, your pensions, okay, the scholarships, okay, certain awards. Okay, so these are all called transfer payments which you need to add to the national income to calculate the personal income. Now, if you again read this formula, it is going to be very easy. So you're taking the national income, subtracting the undistributed profit, subtracting the net interest payment made by household, minus the corporate tax, plus the transfer payments to the households from the government and firms. So you will get your personal income. Now here you can have a look at the transfer payments that we were talking about. So these are nothing but the scholarships or prizes received by the individuals from the government and the firms, right? So you need to understand that for these pensions, scholarships, prizes, nothing is done in return by these individuals. So that is why we are adding it in the national income. So this is like a bonus which is received by them. So that is why to come to the personal income, you need to add this to the national income, right? So friends, here you need to actually ask yourselves a question that is this the final money that the individuals have in their hands, the personal income that we were just discussing? The answer to this is no, because what happens is from this personal income, the individuals need to pay taxes as well. Okay, so also if in case they are fined for certain things, they also need to pay those fines which are called non-taxes. Okay, so now if you remove all these things from personal income, only then you will get this term which is called personal disposable income. This is the income that is retained in the hands of the individual, and this income, whatever the individuals want can do with it. Either they can spend or also they can spend and save. Okay, so this decision lies with individual, and now you need to understand that the final income that is stayed with the individuals for which he can decide whether to spend or save is not personal income but personal disposable income, right? So yes, friends, yet another term that we are coming across is per capita income. So it is very simple. You need to divide the national income by the population. Okay, so now here you would get an understanding as to what is going to be the income of each of the individual when you divide the national income by the population. Okay, and when you say real per capita income, it is nothing but the nominal per capita income adjusted for inflation. So this is the same concept as that of nominal GDP and real GDP. Okay, so you need to understand that. Okay. Now friends, why do we need to find per capita income? What is the advantage of doing so? See, for example, if you can see that when suppose there is a GDP which has increased for a country, but more than the increase in GDP, if you can see that there's a increase in population from one year to the other, you can see that the money that would be in the hands of the people is going to be less. But by seeing GDP, we will get an idea that okay, this particular country is growing very well in terms of the numbers. Okay, but you need to realize that the population of that country is also growing, right? So is the money that has increased adequate enough to actually cater to the entire population, right? How would you find that? This you can answer only when you come out with this per capita income, where you can come out with a number where you will divide the entire GDP, that is national income, by the population. So you will find that in the hands of each person, what is going to be the income that is going to be retained. So here we are not talking about personal income or personal disposable income, but here in general we are talking about the income. Okay, so that is why we compute this per capita income per head. Okay, but friends, now there's one other thing that you need to note, that when you're coming out with this personal capita income, it also has its own drawback. You cannot find the level of inequality that exists by using per capita income, because it is just going to show you a rough figure where you're dividing the total by the population, that yes, approximately each person would have this much amount of money. But is that so? We cannot find out that what is going to be the level of inequality that is existing. Okay, for example, if I say 100 rupees is being distributed in 10 people, okay, but I'm not saying it is equal distribution. I'm just saying that yes, there's 100 rupees available and I'm distributing among 10 people. So now if I ask you roughly what is going to be the distribution per capita here, it is going to be 100 divided by 10. So your answer is going to be that 10 rupees each person is going to get. But now again, the same answer you will get even if I distribute 2 rupees to a single person, 8 rupees to other person. The other person can get a major chunk, 50 rupees. So like that, still this distribution can be uneven among these 10 people. Okay, you understood my point? So here now I cannot say that the distribution is equal. I can just come out with a rough figure saying that yes, each person is going to get 10 rupees. But that is not the case, right? Each person is not getting equal amount of money. That is why we have the inequality, and that is why there is poor and rich people that are there in a country. This is what is inequality, and this is what is not captured in per capita income, right? So friends, the last term that we are going to discuss is purchasing power parity, right? So this is a term which most of us get confused sometime. Okay, so first of all, let me just come to this concept that if you want to compare the GDP of different countries, now what we were dealing till now is that we have a country, for example X, and for that country we are computing GDP. That's it, right? Now I want to ask you a question, that there are so many countries that are there. I want to compare my growth. I want to see whether my country's GDP is greater than the others. How am I going to do that? Okay, so when this comparison comes into play between different countries, I can adopt different indices or I can use different parameters. Okay, so one of those is, if I compute this GDP at exchange rate, I will get the answer for the question that I was asking. Plus there is one other method also, that is GDP at purchasing power parity. Okay, GDP at PPP. Okay, now you need to understand that when you are calculating GDP at exchange rate, what you're doing. Okay, so based on the exchange rate of the currencies, you're going to bring the GDP of all the countries into one common currency. Okay, for example, there is US, there's Germany, there's India. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, if I want to compare all these three countries, I will make sure that, for example, I'm converting the GDP of all these countries into US dollars. Now I can arrange these values in ascending or descending order and come to a conclusion that which country is having highest GDP, right? But now this will not actually give us an answer that what is the purchasing power of the currency. Okay, that means how much a product can be bought with a same amount of money in one country and the other. Okay, so if I have a certain amount of money, will I be able to buy the same quantity if I'm present in US and I'm present in Germany, or I'm present in India? How will you find that? Okay, so that lacunae where you cannot find the purchasing power of the currency is fulfilled when you start using the GDP at PPP, that is purchasing power parity. Now do not get confused if you're not able to grab this concept. We will elaborate it with certain example. Okay friends, so do not get confused if you're not able to understand this concept. Let us try and understand this with the help of an example. Okay, so what is this example saying? So first we will deal with the first aspect that we are having a look at, that is GDP at market exchange rate. So what is this? Nothing but converting the GDP for country using the exchange rate that is there in the market and arriving at a common number through which you can actually compare the GDP of other countries. Okay. Now, for example, the GDP of India is rupees 1300, taking very hypothetical examples for easy understanding. Okay. Now, if I want to know what is the GDP in US dollars, I would divide it by the value which is there according to market exchange rate. So let us consider that the value as per the market exchange rate is $1. $1 is equal to rupees 65. Okay, so this is a market exchange rate. Now, if I want to find the GDP of India in US dollars, I will divide this by 65. Okay, and I would see that the GDP is going to be 20 US dollars. Okay, now what I can do is I can compare now the GDP of India with the GDP of USA, which is again going to be in US dollars. Okay, so now you can see that there is an easy comparison that can be made. But now you need to understand that this comparison that we are seeing here can only be made to the point that which country has more GDP than the other. That's it. Okay. But if I want to find out the purchasing power of the currency, how am I going to do that? Okay, when I want to know that when I'm buying a certain product in India, okay, and a similar kind of a product if I'm going and buying in USA, where am I going to be in profit, or which currency has the capability to buy more, okay, with the same amount of money? Okay, so if I want to come at that conclusion, okay, then I will go to a concept which is called GDP at PPP, that is purchasing power parity. Okay, remember we say casually that the cost of living in this country is high when you compare it with X country or Y country. What is this cost of living? That means how much is the purchasing power of a particular country, okay, of a currency of a particular country, right? Now, when I'm going to this GDP at PPP concept, let me take an example and then we will try and understand. Now, there is a person who's staying in US. He goes to the shop and he buys a particular pen, okay, one pen from that shop, and he sees that he needs to shell out $1 to buy that particular pen. Okay, so now what is the rate here? For one pen, he is shelling out $1. Okay, now he wants to see with the same $1, how many pens can he buy in India? Or rather, I would put it the other way. What is the cost of one similar pen in India? So what he does is he comes to India. Okay, very hypothetical example I'm giving. He comes to India, he goes to a pen shop. Okay, and he has obviously got his $1 exchanged. So what is the exchange rate? Rupees 65. So how much money does he have in his hand? Rupees 65. So now he goes and gives this rupees 65 to the shopkeeper, and he says, give me how many pens can I get for this rupees 65. Now in return, he sees that the shopkeeper gives him 5 pens. Okay, now he says, okay, let me see how much does one pen costs me. So now he needs to divide the 65 by 5, and he sees that the cost of one pen is rupees 13. Okay, so now what is that commodity that we are referring to? One pen. So how much does that one pen cost in actually India? It is rupees 13. And the same one pen, not same, similar, okay, similar one pen in US costs him $1. So the exchange rate would be rupees 13 per US dollar. Right? So for every $1, the value in Indian currency, the purchasing power of Indian currency is going to be rupees 13. Okay, now what I'm going to do, I've got this exchange rate. Okay, this is the exchange rate when you see GDP at PPP. Okay, now I want to calculate my GDP. Okay, so what is the GDP of India? We have seen earlier, it is rupees 1300. Okay, now I want to see what is the GDP at the purchasing power parity. So I'm going to use this particular exchange rate. So what is the exchange rate here? It is nothing but rupees 13 for every dollar. So how much am I going to get? I'm going to get 100 US dollars as my GDP at PPP, right? So this, after coming out with the values of all the countries, this particular value, we can rank the countries in terms of GDP at PPP. This is the purchasing power parity. So friends, let me just summarize that I wanted to find, or I wanted to compare the GDP of various countries. So there are two methods that I can adopt. One is I will see the GDP at the market exchange rate, and then I will compare the GDP of the various countries, because then everyone would be converted into a common currency, and then I can see or say that the GDP of country X is greater or lesser than the GDP of country Y. That's it. Other things, if I want to compare the purchasing power of these currencies, then I'm going to find this GDP at the purchasing power parity. Okay, to do so, I'm going to select a set of goods. This is how it is done. So for all the same goods, I'm going to see how much is it going to value in country X and how much is it going to value in country Y. And then I'm going to compare these rates and then find out the purchasing power of the currencies. Now let me give you again a very simple example so that you can relate to your day-to-day lives. See, what happens is, as we were dealing about the purchasing of goods, now for example, a person can buy a pen for say $1 in US, the same example that we were discussing. Okay, the similar kind of a pen, if he goes to Germany, he will get for $2. Okay, I'm converting it into the the same currency. So now you can see that he has to spend double the amount that he was spending in US. That means the cost of living in US is less. Okay, because the similar product is costing less in US and costing more in Germany. Okay, so if a person has less amount of money, he can still survive in US, but with the same amount of money in Germany, he is going to face problems because the price of the product is double. Okay, here just $1, and here when he comes it is $2. The cost of living is going to be high in Germany. Okay, so this you can relate to the day-to-day lives when we talk with our friends, like when we go to country X, the cost of living was really high, and when I went to this country, I realized that the cost of living is less when compared to India. So when we make such statements, we are referring to nothing but GDP at purchasing power parity concept. Okay. So friends, with this we have come to the end of part 3 and as well as the end of this particular chapter, which is measurement of growth, national income and per capita income. So friends, we have had a look at the various indicators that can be used to calculate the national income. And we had also seen that in India, how was the national income calculated, what were the latest methodological changes that were seen, right? We had also seen the concepts of like what is factor cost, market price, basic price, GVA, right? And we had also come to an understanding that the GDP can be calculated at current prices, which is called nominal GDP, or we can calculate them at constant prices, which is the real GDP. Real GDP would give us an idea about the manufacturing capacity, or rather the capacity of an economy to produce goods and services. And if you want to see the movement of prices, or how much price rise a country has experienced when compared to base year, then you can go for GDP deflator. Then we had also seen about how there's a circular flow of income. We saw a situation, and then we saw that 3 methods can be used to compute national income. One is the product method, or the output or the value added method. Then there is a second method, expenditure method. There's the income method. Okay, then we also moved on to see certain terms like the personal income, personal disposable income, right? What is per capita income? You can do a comparison like what are the advantages of calculating per capita income, as well as what are the drawbacks, what are the things that you would not compute or infer when you actually calculate per capita income. Plus we had also seen one term which is obviously used so many times, GDP at purchasing power parity. You should also need to have an idea regarding the rankings of countries based on this GDP at PPP, right? So till then friends, thank you so much, and then we shall move on to the next chapter where we will see that how important is human development, and then again you need to recall your concept of the differences between growth and development. Thank you friends, and happy learning.